My name is Elaine Mercer. I am 63 years old. That evening, the dining room shimmered with soft jazz and too much confidence. My son, Grant, and his wife, Madison, were hosting a dinner in their new house, one of those immaculate Savannah homes with marble counters and glasses that ring when you touch them. The guests were mostly Madison's friends from her marketing firm, all perfume and polished laughter. I sat at the far end of the table, between a woman who talked about property values and a man who never once looked my way. Grant stood at the head of the table, the host in his element. He looked sharp in his tailored jacket, the one I had helped him buy after college. To my mother-in-law, he began, smiling toward Madison's mother. Still setting the standard for elegance and success, his hand rested lightly on Madison's shoulder. Then he glanced down the table at me. "One day, my mom will catch up to us," he said lightly, glancing down the table. The laughter came quick, easy, practiced, the kind that sounds harmless until you realize it's aimed at you. I smiled, because that was what mothers do: absorb the blow. Pretend it doesn't sting. My wine glass trembled against the linen. I lowered it before anyone noticed. Madison's mother, Valerie, laughed softly and waved her manicured hand. "Oh, Grant, don't tease your mother." But her eyes never reached mine. They just glowed with the pleasure of being the woman at the center. Dinner went on: roasted duck, pear salad, too many toasts. Grant told stories about work promotions, Madison about travel plans. I nodded in the right places. Said how wonderful when expected. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Once, I caught Grant glancing at me quick, guilty, but he turned back to Valerie before I could hold his gaze. When dessert arrived, a slice of key lime pie dusted with gold flakes, I could barely taste it. I heard Valerie talking about her new renovation project, the contractors, the imported tile. "You should see the pool," Madison said proudly. "Mom designed it herself." Grant laughed. "My mother's house could fit inside that pool." Another round of laughter. Something inside me went still. Not angry, just cold and clear. I looked at my son, the boy who once cried when his bicycle broke, the man who now joked as if I were an inconvenience. When the plates were cleared, I excused myself early. Madison kissed my cheek, distracted, already talking to someone else. Grant followed me to the door, smiling too brightly. "You know I was kidding, right?" I nodded. "Of course." Outside, the night air felt sharp, almost kind. I walked toward my car, parked beneath the oak trees. The porch light from their house cast a long shadow across the pavement. I didn't look back. The drive back felt longer than usual. The streets of Savannah were quiet, the oaks arching over the road like tired arms. I rolled down the window, hoping the night air might rinse away the sound of laughter still circling in my head. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint had faded on the porch rail, and one shutter leaned slightly, waiting for me to fix it like I always promised. I sat in the car with the engine running, staring at the porch light. It flickered once, then steadied a little like my pulse. Inside, the silence pressed against me. I hung my jacket on the same hook my husband used to claim, though he's been gone nearly 12 years. On the kitchen counter sat the framed photo from Grant's college graduation. He had his arm around me, smiling with the same confidence that used to make me proud. I touched the glass, tracing his outline. The phone buzzed on the table. A message from Grant got home safe. "Sorry if the joke came off wrong. Everyone thought it was funny, though. I read it twice." Then set the phone face down. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. I poured a small glass of water and leaned against the counter. "Catch up to who?" "Son," I said quietly, more to the air than to him. In the hallway, a box sat half-open old bills, letters, receipts from years of holding everything together. I closed it gently. Outside. A breeze moved through the trees, brushing the window pane. The porch light was still on when I went to bed. It wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. It was just there, steady, like something deciding not to give up. After my husband died, the house grew too quiet, too quickly. Grant was 19, then angry at the world, angry at me for not knowing how to fix it. I remember sitting with the hospital bill in my lap, the ink still wet, and realizing I had two choices: fall apart or keep going. I chose the latter, by day. I worked as a school secretary. I typed letters for a principal who never learned my name and smiled at parents who called me sweetheart. At night, I cleaned the office's downtown vacant cubicles, the smell of disinfectant. Vending machine coffee keeping me upright until nearly midnight. One evening, Grant came into the kitchen, tossing his backpack on the counter. "Everyone else is applying to universities," he said, eyes sharp. "I guess I can't." "Right." I looked up from the envelope I was sealing. "We'll find a way." He frowned. "You always say that." That night, I opened my jewelry box and took out my wedding ring. The gold had dulled over the years, but when I turned it in, the clerk said softly, "It's worth nearly $2,000. I used it to pay his admission deposit. When the acceptance letter arrived, I told him, "You did it." He hugged me then, briefly, like a boy who didn't yet know how far he'd drift. Years later, when I drove him to campus, I slipped a $20 bill in his jacket pocket. "For emergencies," I said. He smiled. "Mom, I'm not a kid." I smiled back. "You'll always be mine." After graduation, he called less. Then came Madison, beautiful, polished. From a family that used words like legacy and investment. I met her parents once. Valerie offered me a tight smile and said, "You must be so proud of how far he's come." I nodded, though something in me tightened. I wanted to say, every mile he walked, I paved. After the wedding, the calls stopped almost entirely. Once, when I asked if they might visit for Thanksgiving, he said, "Mom, you don't need to worry about us anymore. We're fine." The way he said we left no room for me. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once graded his homework beside my cleaning rags, and whispered to no one, "I wasn't worried about you, Grant. I just missed my son." The brunch was held on a Sunday at Valerie's house, white walls, framed art. Everything smelling faintly of lemon and money. I sat near the end of the table, sipping coffee that tasted too perfect to be real. Grant gestured around the room. "Mom, can you believe this Valerie's a real visionary? She's remodeled 3 homes already." Valerie gave a modest smile, though her bracelets clinked like applause. "Oh, I just get bored easily," she said. "When you've got the right eye, you can turn anything into value." Madison laughed softly. "That's where I get it from." I nodded. "They're beautiful houses." My voice came out calm, too even. I'd learned how to sound impressed without feeling small. Grant leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You could learn a thing or two from her, Mom." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. "About what?" He smiled. The kind of grin that stung more than it soothed. "About updating, investing. You still live in the same place I grew up in. That neighborhood's, well, it's not what it used to be." Valerie interjected lightly. "Oh, Grant, don't tease your mother." But she didn't sound like she meant it. I set my fork down slowly, letting the clink echo. "It's home," I said quietly, "and that's more than enough for me." Grant shrugged. "You've got to think bigger, Mom. Don't settle." I looked at him for a moment, his confident posture, the expensive watch, the way he spoke as if success erased origin. "Maybe I already did," I said. He didn't catch the meaning. He just smiled again, proud of himself. crowd, Valerie changed the subject to kitchen renovations, and the table buzzed back to life. I sat still, letting their words wash over me. Somewhere deep inside, something that used to bend began to harden. Grant showed up one afternoon without calling first. His car door slammed, sharp against the stillness of the neighborhood. When I opened the door, he was already scanning the porch, his eyes moving over the chipped paint like it personally offended him. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping inside. "You keeping this place up?" I wiped my hands on a dish towel, as best I can. He nodded, looking around the living room. "You know, Madison and I were talking. Maybe it's time you sell this old house. A condo might suit you better, closer to stores, less maintenance." I leaned against the doorway. "I like it here." He smiled the way he does when he thinks he's being reasonable. "I know, but this neighborhood isn't what it used to be. And honestly, it'd be nice if you lived somewhere that didn't feel so—" He hesitated, then said softly, "Dated, dated." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Less embarrassing when people visit." The silence stretched. I watched him. The man who used to bring me wilted dandelions from the yard, now standing in my kitchen, embarrassed by the woman who raised him. "I didn't realize my house made you uncomfortable," I said quietly. He sighed. "Come on, Mom. I'm just thinking long term. You could get good money for this place. Downsize, relax." I nodded once. "Thank you for your concern, Grant." He checked his watch. "Anyway, think about it. I can put you in touch with a realtor." After he left, the air felt heavier. I sat at the kitchen table, the late light slanting across old papers I hadn't opened in years, savings statements. The insurance payout after my husband died, a small inheritance from my parents in Augusta. I spread them out and started adding. Not memories, not guilt, just numbers. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I owed anyone. I was thinking about what I could build. I sold the small piece of land my parents left me near Skidaway Island. It wasn't much, barely big enough for a fishing shack, but the offer came quickly, and when the check cleared, I felt something shift inside me. I added the amount to my savings and applied for a small loan under my own name. The banker looked surprised when I said I didn't need a cosigner. "Are you sure, Mrs. Mercer?" he asked. "It's a fair sum. I've handled more difficult things than money," I said. 2 weeks later, I founded a tired cottage on the river's edge, hidden behind wild reeds and neglect. The paint peeled like old memories, but the bones were strong. When I stood on the porch, I could hear water moving, steady and patient. I made an offer that afternoon. The first contractor I hired smiled too easily. "You'll want everything new," he said. "Flooring, cabinets, plumbing, that'll run you at least $70,000. I looked at his estimate. "Take off 20, I said. He laughed. "You've done this before?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "I just know when someone's lying." He didn't come back. The next crew worked better. I learned to read invoices, to question materials, to show up before sunrise with coffee and my notebook. Some days I painted until my arms ached, scraping layers of someone else's life off the walls each night. I went home to my old house, showered, and fell asleep with the smell of paint still clinging to my hair. 3 months later, the final inspection passed. The inspector, a woman about my age, handed me the papers. "Congratulations, Mrs. Mercer. She's solid." I signed the deed in full, my handwriting steady. No one knew. No one asked. Grant thought I spent my days volunteering at the library. On the last day of work, I opened a small can of paint, deep crimson, and brushed it onto the front door myself. The color glowed as the sun dropped behind the trees. When the final stroke dried, I stepped back and switched on the porch light. It flickered once, then burned clear and steady across the dark water. I sat on the porch steps, the board still smelling of fresh wood, and watched the river catch the reflection. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy, it felt earned. The house wasn't big and it wasn't new, but it was mine. Every nail, every beam, every drop of sweat belonged to me. When I locked the door that night, I didn't think about what Grant might say or what anyone might think. I just stood there for a moment, my hand on the cool brass handle, knowing I had built something no one expected me to own. A full year passed before Grant called again. His voice sounded cheerful, casual, as if nothing had fractured between us. "Mom, we're hosting another dinner next weekend," he said. "Valerie just finished renovating her house again. You should come see it, she's outdone herself." I pressed the phone against my ear. "I'm sure she has." I said, he hesitated, "It'll mean a lot to Madison if you come. Everyone will be there. Then I'll be there too," I replied. After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the river. The light caught the surface like a mirror, calm and certain. On the evening of the dinner, I opened my wardrobe. The burgundy silk dress weighted the one I'd saved for no occasion in particular. I pinned my hair back and clasped the same pearl earrings I'd worn on my wedding day. My hands were steady. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back wasn't the one who used to wait for approval. She looked composed, almost serene. I smiled once, softly. I didn't need to win. I just needed to arrive. As I locked the door of my cottage, the porch light glowed behind me, steady and warm against the gathering dusk. The dining room shimmered under the chandelier, the same kind of soft light that made everything look gentler than it was. Madison sat beside me, her perfume sharp and floral, while Valerie held court at the head of the table, recounting stories about her contractors and imported marble. Grant was in his element again, laughing, gesturing, confident. "You wouldn't believe it, Mom," he said. "Valerie's new kitchen could fit your whole house inside." I smiled faintly. "That must make cooking easier," he chuckled, not catching the tone. "You should take notes." Madison touched his arm, whispering, "Grant." He waved her off. "Come on, it's just a joke." He lifted his glass. "To my mother-in-law, 3 homes renovated and counting. Always setting the bar high." He turned toward me, eyes glinting. "So, Mom, when will you catch up?" The room stilled, laughter hovering but not yet born. I set my fork down gently. "I did catch up," I said, my voice steady and quiet, letting the weight of it sink in. Grant blinked, uncertain. "What I caught up," I repeated, my voice steady. "Last year." The laughter faltered. Valerie's hand froze mid-gesture, her glass half raised. Madison's eyes flicked from me to Grant, confusion spreading. Grant forced a chuckle. "What do you mean, I mean?" I said, folding my napkin. "I bought a house by the river, paid in cash, built it myself." No one spoke. The air thickened with the sound of realization, quiet, heavy, final. Grant leaned back, searching for his old rhythm. You bought a house, yes?" I said, "A real one, not a condo, not a hand-me-down, mine." Valerie blinked, her smile faltering for the first time. Madison's hand slipped from Grant's arm. "Well," Valerie murmured, "that's impressive." "Thank you," I said softly. "It's exactly what I wanted." Grant stared at me, his grin dissolving. His glass still lifted halfway to a toast that no longer fit the moment. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked finally. I met his eyes. No one asked me to step aside, so I didn't wait. The words landed clean, without anger. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was a mirror. For the first time, they saw me in it. I reached for my water, took a calm sip, and set the glass down. Across the table, Grant's face had changed smaller somehow. Unsure of the man he'd been a moment before, no one spoke again. The chandelier hummed faintly above us, and in the quiet, I felt lighter than I had in years. Grant stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You built a house? Yes, I said. Near the river. His voice cracked on the next word. By yourself, I nodded. With my own money. With my own hands when I had to. Valerie cleared her throat, her voice soft. How wonderful. Elaine, truly inspiring. Thank you, I said, not looking at her. My eyes stayed on my son. He leaned back in his chair, the confident smile gone, replaced by a shadow of doubt and disbelief he couldn't hide. Why didn't you tell me I did tell you things? I said, you just weren't listening. Madison's fork clinked against her plate. She whispered, Grant, but he didn't respond. I continued, steady, quiet. You said I should learn from Valerie. You said I should move somewhere nicer. You thought I was behind. Grant's jaw tightened. That's not what I meant. I let the silence answer for him. You told me to catch up, I said finally, but I was never behind. You just stopped looking long before I arrived. No one moved. Even the air felt heavier. Valerie looked down at her napkin. Madison reached for her water, her hands trembling slightly. Grant stared at the table, his voice smaller now. Mom, I didn't mean to make you feel less. I leaned forward. You didn't make me feel less. Grant, you just forgot I was more. The words landed between us, simple and final. For the first time in years, my son didn't have a comeback. He just sat there, quiet, as if something in him had cracked open, something pride couldn't cover anymore. The silverware gleamed untouched under the chandelier, and in the stillness, I felt something close to peace. The road home was quiet, the city lights fading behind me until only the sound of the river remained. When I turned into the lane, the cottage waited small, steady, alive. I parked and sat for a moment, the echo of that dinner still circling in my mind. Grant's face, shocked, lost, softer than I'd seen it in years, lingered longer than the laughter ever had. Inside, I slipped off my shoes and crossed to the porch. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of the water. I reached for the switch and turned on the light. It glowed against the dark. The same bulb I used to leave burning for my son, hoping he might come by after work. Tonight, it shone for me alone. I sat on the steps, my hands folded loosely in my lap. The river moved slowly beyond the trees, silver under the moonlight. You said I'd catch up, I whispered, my voice low but certain. I already did. A frog croaked somewhere near the reeds. Inside, the clock ticked in an easy rhythm. For the first time in years, the sound didn't remind me of waiting. It just reminded me I was here. The light stayed on.